Welcome to Lead Like a Human, the HR leader's guide to building engaged teams. Our host today is the Chief People Officer and co founder of Amplify, where he helps lead an innovative, highly engaged culture and shares those learnings with people leaders all over the world. In 2020, he was named to Business Insider's list of rising stars in human resources for his work helping people to realize and activate their full potential. In today's webinar, you're going to discover 6 opportunities to increase engagement with examples of how to implement real actions at your company. Learn how to recognize the difference between satisfaction and engagement, and identify which elements of your strategy are perks and nice to haves, and which ones actually impact business outcomes. You're also going to learn how to leverage data and measurement effectively to prioritize focus and show ROI on your efforts. So let's get started. Please welcome Adam Weber.
Hey everyone, it's good to be with you this morning. Not sure what time of day it is for you. It's morning for me, so I've got my cup of coffee and very much looking forward to sharing with you today. First, let's just go back in time just a little bit and talk about how dramatically our world has changed. I mean, 20 years ago, we didn't even know how this movie ended. And if you haven't seen it yet, I hate to spoil it for you, but he was dead the whole time. And this is what the phone looked like. And I don't know about you, but based on my day, I had like a cover I'd put on that with different colors to kind of be like, I'm having a blue day today. You know, I'm a little down. Or I'm having a red day. I'm feeling real good about myself. And I'd T9 all my friends. And of course, this was me. And it's funny is when I first got this picture into our office, this is pre-COVID, of course, when in the office, one of the employees was like, if that you could see who you ended up marrying, like you'd be very proud of yourself. And it's not great to get a picture of yourself from 20 years ago because it was before digital, right? So there's only one way to do it. It's like you have to call your mom. And I call my mom, I need a photo from the early 90s. And she goes, really? Do you remember that time? So, but this is obviously not the only thing that's changed in the workforce. If you look 20 years ago and how the workforce looked, not a single millennial in the workforce, and yet today it makes up the largest section of the entire workforce. And it's not just millennials, it's actually this shift and how culture has shifted has fundamentally shifted what matters to the workforce. So 20 years ago, the most important values were compensation, benefits, and stability. Today, cultural values, the authenticity of leadership, and career opportunities or professional development are now the top 3 things. So the values of the business, the authenticity of the leadership, and professional development opportunities. In addition, the way people think fundamentally about work has shifted. Like no longer do people show up to a job and go, on their first day, you know, someone right out of college go, you know what? I think I'm going to work here till I'm 65. I think this is the place. I found it. No, it doesn't work like that at all anymore. It's actually quite different. We've got boomers now only stay at their job an average of 7 years. Generation Xers only 5 years. Millennials only 1.8 years. So this fundamental shift has taken place in how people view work. And in addition to that, we have a workforce that is also disengaged. So in addition to turning people over constantly, we also have a workforce that is fundamentally disengaged. 3 in 10 people on your team right now who, if you think about that, if you got a team of 10, 3 are likely showing up and bringing their best self to work every day. 7 disengaged. And this impact is dramatic in how it's hurting businesses. When you've got a disengaged worker, they're not as productive as they should be. They're not as innovative as they could be. And ultimately, it starts to hurt the thing I was already sharing, like the bottom line of your business. When your people don't show up and bring their best self to work, it impacts your business. It impacts your business. It impacts your brand reputation, which we talked about now really matters. Like it matters to employees how your business is perceived. And ultimately, that's where you get turnover. Now, the reality, though, is this is not an unsolvable problem. If you can tap into this concept of employee engagement and create highly engaged teams, your teams are more than 87% less likely to leave than their disengaged counterparts. And in addition to that, they are more than 2x likely to outperform their disengaged counterparts. So you get into the bottom line of the business. And so let's talk about it. Like, how do you create this? How do you create a culture of highly motivated people? Like, what is this thing, employee engagement? And so here's how we define what employee engagement is, just to level set. And what I'll do is just kind of talk through what it is, and then I'll talk through some practical tips today on ways you can drive performance and engagement on your team by leading in a way that aligns to your own values. So employee engagement is an employee's intellectual and emotional connection with an employer, demonstrated by motivation and commitment to positively impact the company's vision and goals. So simply put, it's how an employee thinks about the business in their head, how they feel about the business in their heart, and how that impacts the work they do every day with their hands. And but we are all complicated creatures, and so we're complicated people. And so there's really 17 different factors that are at play that dictate whether or not a person is engaged or disengaged. And so I co-founded a company called Amplify. We're an engagement measurement company, and basically what we did was we deconstructed what it means to be engaged. And this is kind of what we came up with. And simply put, what we do, or how we use these drivers, is we look where teams of people are all having a common issue. And then we figure out, we use the drivers to pinpoint what those issues are, and we unblock them to create team performance. So just as an example, if you think about the macro trends of the workforce today, what are we dealing with? We're dealing with situations of dramatic burnout. So we have people right now who are probably even on the webinar right now. All of us are dealing with this, and we're feeling this burnout. That is probably the most common issue today. And so that would tie into these right here: rest, goal support, and capacity. So those three specifically, when they're in motion together, rest, capacity, and goal support, are your burnout drivers. Prior to COVID, just to give you another example of how this works, the biggest issue that definitely hasn't gone away, a whole bunch of line level managers just got promoted into management for the very first time. And they lack the soft skills and the training and development needed to lead high performance teams. And they created psychologically unsafe environments. Maybe that was pushed down from the top. And they struggle with giving effective feedback. And in many ways, COVID, which created distance between people, like physical distance, has actually only exacerbated that problem. And so just as an example of how these drivers work. And so we'll talk a little bit more about ways to activate these at the back part of the talk. But one of the things that shifted in our society over those 20 years is this view of kind of that old way, which is stability, I'm not going to quit, to engagement. And so what we used to measure was a thing called satisfaction. Am I comfortable? Am I going to stay? And I work only enough to meet basic expectations. Satisfaction is this, like, how we used to measure that is, would you recommend this company to a friend? And we determine if we were doing well with our company culture based on that question. But the problem is, if you pay someone too much money to do too little work, they might tell all their friends, but they're also not bringing their best self to work every day. And so engagement, on the other hand, is great. It's how can I drive the business forward? And my heart and mind are in it. And I give 115% every day. And so this is the thing that we're after. We're after a team of people working in unison where they are bringing their very best self to work every day. When you think about why this isn't working at the core, it really is leaders. And I have come across, I've had the privilege of doing this talk and talking around subjects like this for thousands of leaders. And one time, actually, at the very beginning, I was in the middle of a talk. I was talking about the generational change, and this guy's wearing a brown suit, front row. And I don't know if he thought it was actually his talk, but he stood up and went, in the best way I could describe it was a diatribe about, and it sounded something like this, like, I'm just so frustrated. Why can't my employees just feel happy to have a job and work at a company like mine? I'm good to them. Why don't they see it? And they say things like, my employees lack work ethic. They want to be involved in everything, and they care more about the life in the work-life balance. And in many ways, this type of leader was born from a different era, was born out of the Industrial Revolution in a control and command style. And today they're finding themselves exceptionally frustrated because the tactics and techniques they used for the previous era are not working in today's era. And so we're going to talk today about how to create a new type, like how to start a movement of a new type of leader that leads in a different way, who is connected to their employees, and who can create these high performance teams that lead to the bottom line of the business. And so I use the name Motivated Michael because Michael is a real person in my life. And I'll share this in a bit, but I wrote a book. It's called Lead Like a Human, and it's centered around all the concepts we're going to talk about in the back part of this talk. But I spent 10 years of my career wandering, really before I got into entrepreneurship, just kind of wandering around job to job. And I showed up for the first time with this guy, Michael. He ran a 12-person business. And on the very first day, he sat me down and said, I don't care when you show up. I don't care when you leave. What I do care about is if you really set your mind to it, what could you do to unlock this business? And it awakened me, and it set a fire in motion in me that ultimately is why I'm doing this talk today. But when you see these motivated Michaels, it's a different type of leader. It's my employees have made the decision to work for me, and it is my responsibility to ensure that their work is challenging and meaningful. So it's not easy, but what they're doing is they're inspiring the best, they're transparent, and they're focusing on outcomes, not hours. So we're going to transition and talk through that. The rest of what I'm going to do is just talk through 6 simple steps on how to tap into that type of leader, how to build highly engaged teams that are motivated, committed, and bring their best self to work every day. But in addition to that, are connected with who you actually are, like that allow you to lead in a way that you're proud of, that you as a leader can look back on and say, I did this in a way that was meaningful to me and that I am proud of. For those of you that are listening that are maybe CEOs or in HR, I always say this, like in talks like this, your job for everyone is to do the work of translation. I am doing a talk for lots of people, and your role is then to go, but how could I apply this myself? So engage yourself and then do the work of translation to go, I see what he's saying, but my context is a little different, so I'm going to apply it a little bit differently. That's okay. Let's do that. And I am a tactical person. I am like, what are actual things you can do, like systems and processes that you can put in place that can scale this human leadership concept? And so for some of you that are direct managers, these will be tips that will apply directly to you. And for those of you in HR, these might be good practices you can institute across your entire company. And then also, and I think we'll just have this posted as a follow-up as well, I have a resource guide that goes deeper on all of these subjects, so you can go in a little bit deeper, and it actually helps you work through each of these steps and how you'd apply them yourself. So without further ado, let's move to the 6 steps to build a highly engaged team. The first is centeredness. The second is align around your company's purpose. The third is define and activate your values. The fourth is set goals. The fifth is create a culture of continual improvement. And the 6th is use data. So let's start with the one that is definitely the least obvious on the slide on what it means, and that is centeredness. So what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is that if we're trying to create and raise a new wave of leaders who truly lead like a human, there is one hard truth I think that we all need to talk about. And that's this, that we all want there to be a silver bullet. We want to show up to a talk and go, just tell me how to build the engaged team. I take good notes. I'm a doer. Just tell me what to do. And the reality is that to lead in this new way, there is no silver bullet to becoming an authentic leader. It is truly a combination of doing the work to become an authentic person and applying solid leadership principles and tactics. But there's a duality there, and we'll talk later about the leadership principles and tactics. But there is a first part, which is for you to truly do this, for you to be this type of lead like a human leader, you have to do the work yourself. And that work is challenging work because it is the work of who you are. It matters if you think about how that the values of the workforce has changed. It matters because the workforce is saying we value the authenticity of leadership. The authenticity of leadership looks a lot like self-reflection. And whether that, the key here is, what practices do you need to put in your life to allow you to show up in a consistent and steady way, and that grow you in your self-awareness of how you show up to the workforce. Too often leaders, all of us, so I'm not exempt from this, we move on this continuum of frustrated Frank to motivated Michael. We're not always one or the other. And sometimes we're just creating havoc inside of our organization, and we ourselves are unaware of the impact we're having on those around us in our direct team. And so a practice of self-reflection, of growing in your self-awareness on how you're showing up, I would take that a step further and saying, having those conversations with your team and creating a safe enough space where they can help you see negative ways that you show up. But the work of an authentic leader is someone who can consistently show up and be their authentic self in the workplace. As far as daily practice, and the workbook lays this out, but for me, it's all about a consistent and steady morning routine, which involves reading something that's timelessly true. It involves journaling. And I think there's all sorts of layers there on leader, like growth, personal development, ways that you are working on yourself, exercise, sleep, all of those things are in there. I put get a hobby because so often, especially people who are showing up to talks like this, you are a go-getter. You're like, I have things to do in my career. I have things I am after. But if you cannot be the leader you aspire to be, if this is the totality of who you are, and it is important to have things that also bring value and meaning to your life outside of work. And then I already shared a little bit about focusing on your health. So step one, and I'm going through all of them. I'm kind of busting through. So if you're a person who's just tell me some of the tactics, we're going to get into it. The book and the resource guide both go deeper on all of these things. The next is aligning around your company purpose. Same reason, culture changed. Now, employees want to work for a company with a noble purpose. They want to know why this company exists. And all too often, company purposes are written, but if you walked around the company, or if you were on a Zoom call and you went around and had everybody recite it, the answers would be different. That somehow the company purpose is turned into one of these motivational posters that sits on the wall and it's all dusty, but it's not activated. And the hard truth with this is that there is someone else watching this video right now whose company does the same thing yours does. And so what makes you unique? Why does it matter what you do, and what difference are you making in the world? Now, take the time to make that real. Make it authentic. It does not matter what industry you're in. And if you don't have it, it's not worth doing. There has to be a bigger reason. And by exposing it and then bringing it to life inside of your company, you will tap into the engagement of your workforce. A classic example of that is in 1962, NASA, the infancy of the space agency, and JFK is taking a tour, and he sees a janitor, and he asks the janitor, "What are you doing?" And the janitor responds, "Mr. President, I'm helping put a man on the moon." That is when you know you have an activated purpose. Because inside of a company, there's a handful of people who get to be very close to that purpose. But how do you, as a leader, put systems in place that allow all people inside the company to feel connected to that noble purpose? One of the simplest ways to do this, I think, is aligning your team to your purpose by sharing customer stories regularly. Create a system, a mechanism, whatever that manifestation of your purpose lived out is, and get it back in front of your team, no matter their roles. There are so many people in your company right now who have harder jobs than you do, who have thankless jobs, who, if reminded, will get that extra lift and show up and bring their best self to work. For us, so you how we do this, we get a customer to share back to our team once a month. We want to make sure that if our purpose is to help all people achieve their true potential at work, are we unlocking potential? We want to make sure that no matter what role our employees are in the business, that they hear the stories of the actual people who see the fruition of our purpose. The other benefit to that is that your purpose, it should be true right now. It may not be true in its totality, but it does need to be true today as well. Think about ways that will help you know if you're making progress on that purpose. And like whether it's milestones or different celebration points, and just celebrate them. How do we, again, it's the same concept before, how do we put systems and structures in place that remind people that this purpose is not a dusty thing on a shelf, but is activated and lived out? My favorite story of this is a story of a guy on our team. His name's Chip, and he's on the sales team, and he sold his $1,000,000. When he sold his $1,000,000, it was like, a big deal. We're not a huge business, and we got everybody together to celebrate. And he actually flew in for this, and we had a toast for him. But this was our janitor moment. He raised his glass and said, "I've been reflecting this week like on this accomplishment, and what really stands out to me is not it's not the money. It's that 40,000 employee lives were improved, were impacted because of the work that I did." And that personal connection of my role to the company's purpose is a really powerful thing. And so how that is also when it's working beyond yourself. You need to have a purpose that is lived out amongst the entire team, not just like on the leadership team. So just a couple practical things. Connect your people to the purpose. Make sure everyone in the company understands the noble reason that your business exists. Share stories of success and determine different milestones and celebrate those milestones. The next is activate your core values. So similarly to the purpose, these are both likely things that are in place right now that are not being tapped into to really enable the workforce. And so step one to this, to me, is I want everybody to pause and just think, who are your cultural rock stars right now? Who are the people inside of your company that best exemplify the culture? I'll give you just a second. I'll take a sip of my coffee, and I want you to actually write it down. It's okay, it's a recording. Just write down someone who is that person. And then just go one step further and I want you to write down 2 or 3 attributes that person has. So it's a talk for a different day, but right there, you're now at the essence of what your activated values are. Your values should be live and in the wild today, seen in the best of your culture. With those people, our recommendation is integrate them into your hiring process. Have them and screen actually for your values as well. So how can we integrate employees into the hiring process and really give them a voice? If we want our employees to think like owners, to be engaged, we need to give them authority like they are owners. And so one of the ways, and we've got in our resource guide, you'll find examples on how to ask questions that get to values. Because what this isn't is, well, do these people look like us and talk like us and think like us? It's not that. Your values should be measurable. You should know if you're living out your values. We have 6 different core values at our company, and this is just one so you can see what I mean by that. And our resource guide has examples on how you translate how you know if you're living it to what types of questions you can ask in the interview process as well. Now, if you are reading this going, oh my gosh, I just have to revamp. I'm not here. Like, I just have to revamp my entire values. Go back to that culture rockstar slide. That's your team to build it right there. Whoever showed up there. And then the book actually lays out the step-by-step process on how to build your core values. And then the next step would be activation. So with this, integrating it into hiring, the other is integrating it into feedback, because it values activated is what it does is it should be integrated into your performance review process. Like it's bigger than saying, here's why. A performance review traditionally looks something like this. What did you do, right? Check the box, check the box, check the box. Integrating values into your hiring process transitions it to not just what did you do, but how did you do it? did you do it in a way that aligns to our values? And so that's why it's critical that with your values, you have clarity on, like, really clear ways to say, well, are you living these values out? And then the last one here is just incorporate it into recognition. Do you have a peer nominated way, so it can't, not from the top, from the employee base, to recognize and nominate your employees to celebrate when those values are lived out? This is just an example of an annual culture award. So we have a legend award. It's nominated by peers, and it's a way to keep those values front and center. The nominations have to be specific to the value and actions that back that up. So as I mentioned, I covered all of this, but just integrate the values into your hiring process. Integrate it into how you give feedback, not just a what did the employee do, but how did they do it? And then use those values in recognition. Next step, hope you're rocking and rolling. This is usually the spot where you're like, oh my gosh, I haven't listened to something for this long. I'm starting to get distracted because it's 2020 and like I have a phone and an iPad and a laptop. So just like big deep breath with me real quick. Put that computer on mute so you can stay focused. We got some good stuff still coming. So moving to set goals. This one seems so obvious, and yet it is so rarely tapped into. And why it matters is when you think about an engaged employee, is that the purpose and the values I talked about earlier get into alignment to the company's why. But there's another component to create an activated employee, which is alignment to that individual's why. And I have found there's no more effective way to connect those dots than through goal setting. To uncover an employee's why as a manager or as a leader of a company, understanding what goals they have in their life and why they're doing what they're doing is a really powerful way to tap into this why. So a really simple way to do this is a goal setting session or workshop. We do these all the time. So usually kind of our best practice is like the third week of January is a pretty special time to run something like this. We run it with teams at the team level. And you can flex on the time, but in general, what you're doing is as a group, you're giving people space to think through, what are your professional goals this year? What are your personal goals this year? What in your life needs to change in order to make those goals happen? And why are these goals significant to you? And what you're really after, if you're a manager or a leader, is you're trying to just go a couple layers deeper. Like, for example, not I want to make more money, but I want to make more money. Why? I want to make more money so I can take my kids to Disney World. Okay, why? Because I want to create lasting memories during this season of my life. Okay, got it. So now I know now I'm like onto with this person. And as a manager now, I am their teammate, right? If it's my job to get the best out of them, now we're aligned. I know the real reason you're working, and I know what's really ultimately motivating to you. And so let's make sure we map out a plan that gives you the very best chance to be successful. And there is this other really beautiful thing that comes from setting goals, is that when we run these goal setting workshops, we end up having the team, if they're willing, we don't make anybody do this, but share those goals publicly. They write it down, pen to paper, something that happens there to the brain. When you write it down, you make an emotional commitment to it. And another thing happens when you share it to the rest of the team. And there's also this built-in accountability. That Disney story is actually a real story. When it was shared originally, the very first time I did this, 8 years ago, for the very first time on a team, employee said he wanted to take his kids to Disney World. Taking his kids, by the way, every single year since that goal setting workshop until this year, of course. We'll see if it happens later. But the very first year wasn't on track, didn't have a plan. Someone else on the team said, in a sarcastic way, but in a loving way, how's that Disney trip coming? And it builds in some accountability to let other people know what you're working on in your own life too. Next tip, continual improvement. There is a practical reality that I love doing talks like this, because you don't show up to a talk like this unless you yourself actually have this. Like, you're going, no, I know I need to get better. That's like why I'm here. And the reality of building high performance teams is that it starts with you. But when you as a leader display a willingness to receive feedback. When you as a leader show that you are also getting better, it makes your people want the same kind of feedback. It gives you permission to raise the bar that you hold them to when you yourself are willing to show them that you hold yourself to a high bar. I love this photo because if you this is me on the far right, and just to the left of me, there's this guy, Derek Grant. He's the VP of sales at a company called SalesLoft. And earlier in my career, I was a VP of sales and not very good at it, had a lot of room to grow. And I met him at a conference and I said, this guy's like one of the best in the industry. I go, can I just learn from you? And he said, sure, come down. Flew to Atlanta, spent 10 hours with him. I spent the whole day, let me sit in on all of his one-on-ones, his team meetings, ask him questions. And I mean, I just took pages and pages of notes, but I went back to my team and I said, hey, here's what I learned. Here's how I'm getting better. And I'm showing them that I hold myself to a high bar as well. Another example of like this high bar is I worked with leaders who maybe built environments that weren't very psychologically safe, which there's a lot of people listening right now, just to be candid, who are listening going, this is all great, but like my CEO would never be on board because they create psychologically unsafe environments. We've worked in environments like that. And one of the things in this high bar example is when you can encourage executives to share back to the team their own growth and development areas. One being, I worked with an executive where they had to say to their team, like, hey, I often skew negative. And I'm realizing in team meetings that I need to make sure I'm highlighting positive things. And you could watch the room just naturally diffuse, like, oh, too. Okay, cool. Now there's a little bit more permission and freedom to help, to be a part of that. But also for that leader now, as when they recognize that they're not perfect themselves, they can elevate and hold their team to a higher bar. Another really practical way you can do this is to actually do the job of your employees at least once a month or once a quarter. And I share this video because this is me back when I was doing that VP of sales role, hopped on a sales call, just got totally rejected, and then I shared it with the whole team. And the reason I did it was because I wanted them to know that I understand their job is hard. And if I'm going to hold them to a high bar, I want them to know, though, that I have empathy for the work that they do. And so just a challenge to all of you to make sure that you don't get too disconnected from your employees and the work that they do every day. By doing it, you will create safe spaces when processes are broken to share them. Like, you will see some of the broken processes. You'll be able to talk openly back and forth. And then so just on this, just to summarize, so living it out looks like it starts with you as a leader, put yourself in their shoes, and create consistent rhythms for feedback, which I didn't touch on, but in general, it's like one of the things that employees crave with continual improvement is, are they getting better? Like, that's the third most important. So career opportunities, the other way that we see it is manifest is through professional development. The third most important thing to employees, are they getting better? And so I always task, like, one, feedback has to be steady and consistent. And two, I always make sure there's one named area where they can improve or where they're working to get better. So the very last one, what I'm obviously the very most passionate about, is using data. Because the reality is that oftentimes HR leaders and executives are totally exhausted because everything I just shared, they're like, the spirit behind this is great, but I am trying everything and nothing is working. And there is a challenge when without data, you just feel like you're spinning too many plates. But what data does is it gives you the permission to say no. When we implement new initiatives, we want to have precision accuracy that, one, those initiatives will actually unlock the engagement of the team, and two, that once we put the initiatives in place or make these changes, like, we want to prove back, did it make a difference? And so that's what data can do. Like, without it, you don't have a clear picture of your team and the issues that you need to help solve. And so what ends up happening is we end up guessing. We end up guessing and we end up exhausted. We use gut feel, we use intuition. And what we really do is we listen to the bottom 20% of our employees that are the loudest and the top 10%. And unfortunately, in the top 10% is one person who is exceptionally good at managing up and terrible at managing down, and they're wreaking havoc on your organization, and you are totally blind to it. And data gives you the truth, not about winning awards. It's about knowing the truth of your organization. It's as a leader, you can make bold decisions when you have clarity on where everyone else is, like where your employees actually are. And if used well, it has the power to revolutionize how you engage with your people, because you're aligning your language and your actions to the thoughts and beliefs and experience of your employees that they are already having right now. They're already experiencing it as we speak. But I think all too often, and I think where there's skepticism with this is like, how do we actually do it? And so this is what we see happens all the time, is that there's a huge gap between gathering employee feedback and turning it into actions or repeatable, like impactful business outcomes. And so done wrong, you actually can make things worse. You erode trust, morale, retention, and team performance. And so our simple philosophy here is that there's 4 basic parts, and you have to step by step work through each of them in order to use data wisely. So the first is gathering that employee feedback. The second is having precision, and this is why we believe you need a third party to help you understand what the data says and what to do about it. So like discover the truth about your business. The third is align your executive team to that truth, which is not a job that should be done internally. How do we align our executive team to the truth of the business and what to do about it? And then the fourth, which is like so under talked about, but like the reality is HR teams are exhausted at times, executive teams are exhausted at times. The only way to create a highly engaged culture is to empower and enable and lead your managers. Develop those managers who are at the ground level and give them the tools, the resources, the coaching they need to act, centered on precision data. So that's kind of the basic process of how you can use this to help give you permission on what to say no. Just a couple ways we do this. So this for us is like, so we don't want to just talk about having an engaged team. We want to have a numeric representation that says, well, are we actually creating that lean forward posture for our business? And then do we have that ability to pinpoint by team, by gender, by tenure, what exactly of those 17 drivers I shared about earlier, like what is causing disengagement? And then which one of the, and then what can we actually do about it? Which is the work that we love and the work that we do the most. So with that, it's kind of live it out. And I think I shared all of these, but the benefit here is focus and confidence to make bold decisions, and that you're working in a way that is actually aligned to the needs of your business. So those are the tips. There's a lot there. Hopefully that was helpful. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a companion resource. There's a book called Lead Like a Human, which you can find on the Amazon bookstore. And we'd love to have a conversation with you too. But let me just close with this, that this is a new way to lead. And sometimes people hear this talk and they just go, I just needed to know I was allowed to do this. And so this is your permission, like be your best self, see the best in your team, and lead them in unlocking their potential. And in doing so, you will be able to be the type of leader that you're proud of. You'll be able to build a high performance team, and you'll be able to do work that is meaningful to them as well and change their lives in the process. So order on Amazon today. This is my book. It's called Lead Like a Human. And then also, if you are interested in learning more about how we partner with organizations to create a feedback system where we hear from the employees and then we coach those leaders on the practical things, like what do we actually do? And we help develop those managers as well. It's a fixed system, so it moves and flows pretty easily. And we'd love to have a conversation with you. Really appreciate you taking an hour and spending some time with me. Feel free to do Contact at Amplify. If you have a specific message for me, you can send it there and they'll forward it on to me and I'll get back with you. Thank you all so much.